Hello and welcome to the podcast for June 14th. My name is Les Pounder, Associate Editor, and with me tonight I've got Raspberry Pi expert Ash Hill, and our special guests tonight are Method Dan himself, Dan Lynch, and Caroline Keep. Hello.
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 How are you all? It's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah. It's been strange with the last obvious recent kind of events in the last couple of years. We've missed some of our maker events, haven't we, and so on. But it's nice. It's nice to be back. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I mean, me and Dan have been, as usual, seeing quite a bit of each other because we run our podcast
COVID
together.
compliant.
Yeah.
When that was a thing.
Yeah,
which
totally.
it kind of still is.
But obviously, we've kind of been. I've been cracking on in education and research, and Dan's been cracking on podcasting, and both of us now are cracking on with MakeFest.
That's very true.
Well, that's one of the two reasons you're both here tonight to talk about. So
nice.
I want to just introduce you both. So if you could both tell us who you are, why you're here tonight, and something interesting about yourselves. Come on.
Go on, Dan. Go for it.
Oh, thanks
No
for that.
pressure.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
No pressure.
So you've got more thinking time. Hello. Nice to see you. My name's Dan. I'm from Liverpool, from Merseyside. I used to be a big kind of Linux guy. These days, I'm not as much, if I'm honest. I'm going to completely let the side down in admitting that this is on a Windows computer at the moment. So I've said sacrilege, I know. But yeah, so I'm a podcaster and a writer, and not as much of a writer as Les, unfortunately, but I try. And I also run some events like OggCamp, which were along with Les and Caroline, which was the largest kind of open source free software open source technology event in the UK. It's not dead. It's been on sabbatical because of, again, I mentioned reasons, and hopefully it'll come back, but we'll see. But yeah, we ran that for like 10 years, quite a long time. And something interesting about me. I'm trying to think. What can I say that's interesting about me?
I can say loads about Dan. Let me tell you.
There we go.
Go for it.
So, Dan, used to do Linux Outlaws, massive podcast that obviously had like cult following. OggCamp ran for 10 years and was a fundamental open source festival that he organised with a few, me and Les being one of them, on across the UK. He had guests such as Stephen Fry.
We had Stephen Fry, yeah. I'm still dining out on that.
Yeah, exactly.
On the Stephen Fry thing. I just mention it now and again, you know.
And he does loads of, as I said, kind of podcasts. He's got one on Bosch, haven't you, at the moment?
That's not going anymore. We were doing one on, Sorry, we should have checked our scripts before we started.
And he runs the open source Linux get together.
The Liverpool Lug Linux user group. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, I run that. That's a monthly meetup for people who are into Linux and open source stuff.
And he runs the Ignite talks in Liverpool as well. So he also does a whole bunch of short talks in Liverpool for anybody to come and talk about something that they're doing or any kind of project that they're into. So Dan does loads. He just forgets it.
It's great the way I introduced myself there, wasn't it? Thank you. I just
delegated it. It was great.
I delegated it. Yeah.
Oh, it's all right. We'll have this moment where I have to introduce me now, and it'll be like a long, boring speech.
Okay.
Come on, Carl, give us a speech.
Caroline Keep. So I'm a maker first and foremost, an old school maker. I was running Ogg with Dan, and I run Liverpool MakeFest along with Dan. And Les has been part of the team to run it before now. That's been running in our 7th year now.
Wow,
that's
7.
7th year. And
scary.
We've been, I know, it feels like yesterday. And that is the biggest digital maker festival in the UK for kids and families that can come and see makers once a year and kind of see what kind of projects they're doing. I designed it for kids and the public to come and attend free at the Liverpool Central Library, so that young people, because I'm also a teacher, could come and see maker projects and get involved in maker projects and be able to see what was going on in their communities. That since then got spun out to all of the libraries across the UK and the country, and we wrote some maker national guidance for the National Digital Library System in the UK. Dan did too. He just forgets
I contributed.
that he did. And that covers how any library in the country or any community space can set up the event and help them get funding to fund it and go forward and fund their maker communities around their area. Because the event itself also funds maker organisations and maker businesses within the region that you run one. And then I'm a teacher, also the founder of the first makerspace in a UK school, and I do stuff for maker educations across the country. I do lots of workshops with Industry 4 stuff. I'm currently doing stuff with Create Education in 3D printing. I'm the Ultimaker Innovator of the Year, and I'm currently one of the Educator Innovators of the Year. I think it's on there somewhere. And I do loads of research in education, and I'm currently doing a PhD in how to digitize education and bring it into the modern day era using machine learning, artificial intelligence and data science, because I'm also a data scientist. This feels a long list.
Well, that is a long list. In the spare 5 minutes you have every week, what do you do? Sleep?
Yeah.
I think you're going to say the spare 5 minutes we've got left for the show.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for, folks.
You both have so much experience with both
time.
making stuff and with Linux, but we brought you to the Piecast. So what got you guys involved with the Raspberry Pi?
Oh, I'm one of the Raspberry Pi master teachers. So I did one of the Raspberry Pi courses as a teacher and did a whole bunch of stuff with Raspberry Pi. And we're all good friends with Pete Lomas, who's one of the founders of the Raspberry Pi.
How can you not be?
So he's come to our festival every year, so I'm hoping he's there this year. And he opened my first makerspace, the first makerspace in the country. So he came and supported and gave us some relatively good, solid advice. So we've been using Pi since, I don't know, back and beyond. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure these two have some interesting tales about pies. But
yeah,
I think,
raspberry and otherwise.
Yeah, I know. So we've been using that, but I've been using it quite extensively with school kids and also for development and for things like OE2 projects and various other things to get teachers, get kids, get young people using it. So yeah, I've been brought here because Les said to me, "Can you come and talk?" So that intro feels really long.
Yeah. But in the words of Wayne's World, book them, they will come.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. If Les asks me for something, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I want to ask you now about a makerspace in education. So when I was at school, and I'm an old man now, and we had CDT, so craft design technology. We had an electronics lab as such, woodwork, metalwork, that sort of thing. But it wasn't a makerspace. So why do we need a makerspace in a school now?
The problem is that a lot of the tech development areas that we used to have, like we had woodwork and electronics and all of them, a lot of them have gone. So a lot of those departments don't exist anymore. A lot of them got moved and schooled up and things got reused. And then just a lot of those departments, if they do still exist, really, really struggle to exist, especially in the UK system where DT gets very little funding. And actually, a lot of the new tools for Industry 4 that we developed as they were coming forward, that we started using, Internet of Things and 3D printers and all of the kit that we normally get and we've seen develop over, especially makers have over the time it's been out, from back in the day when you had a maker bot, you know what I mean, to now where you've got a really slick 3D printer. A lot of those technologies haven't fed into schools. In fact, in the UK, the Department of Fair Education recently described the digitization of schools as part of the Hodder report as grossly under digitized. It's just not happened in schools. And the problem is with that is that we don't then have a lot of the avenues for the jobs that we actually need young people to be doing. So if you really, a makerspace is very much a specific area that is geared for enrichment and opportunities for young people to build the projects that they want. But to do that, you have to actually teach them the skills to build the projects they want. It's not good enough to just put the kit in a room. So, I've done some lovely CPD with the likes of the Maker UK and Alison Buxton at the University of Sheffield that anybody can go to. It's on Sheffield University on FutureLearn. You can look it up. It's called, Makerspaces in Education, that will teach you how to set up a makerspace that will be successful, but also pedagogically good. So if you're in a school or you're a person who's part of a school or you've got young people and you want one in your school, that's the kind of places that you go to get that kind of info. And Raspberry Pi and microbits and 3D printing and all of the kind of maker culture things we know are a big part of that. So we do need those kind of experts in, but that's why we need it. And it has to be carefully thought out in schools.
Based on your experience working with students, and including anything from 3D printing to microelectronics, robotics, Pi, Linux, whatever, what have you noticed that kids tend to take to quickest first when they get introduced to this world?
Surprisingly, they take quickest to physical computing. Physical computing is the favorite. As much as we'd love the computing curricula to be, really interesting, if it's on a screen, it's really not that interesting. So actually, being able to watch kids physically do computing, where they wire up an LED, where they set up a Raspberry Pi, where they build an Internet of Things weather station. Those are the kind of projects. Yeah. Using the GPIO pins, just learning how to, accurately wire and code and put things together. That is the thing that they take to every time. The most requested thing to go into schools and train people on is robotics. Can you run robotics with us? Can you run, physical computing sessions with us? So quickly followed by, can you do 3D printing sessions with us? They are the two that are the most taken to. And I think it's because of the physicality of the subject. You've got kind of physical things going on for students, and that itself makes it very different to everything else they get.
It's literally hands-on.
Yep. So there's no screen aspect to it other than like you would if you were doing yourself a Raspberry Pi setup. That you code something, you see that it works. So, you can test whether that works. But it gives you something that you can then take out and showcase, and that is a big part. So I think that's the one that they take to most and fastest. So if you run two things, you run them. You run, Raspberry Pi hardware, and then you run 3D printing hardware. They're the two that I recommend to start with. And then from there, you can then span out into all the other kind of things that you can do, with students, like game development, or you can do, things like visual special effects, or all the kind of, Autodesk. You can do all the rest of it. But if you start with those two, it gets them very invested.
Blinking LED.
Yeah, blinking LED. Sounds really tight, but yeah, one of the first advices I give to teachers is just get some cardboard, and all of us will agree on this. Get some cardboard and some LEDs, and a small board of some variety, a small board from Pi or a microbit or any kind of hardware, and just build something. They're just little. Doesn't need to be perfect. Doesn't need to be wonderful. Just start building things. If you just start with some cardboard, put a literal cardboard sign above a school classroom or a community space that says makerspace, and announce you've got a makerspace, and then build your community around that, because that's what really matters.
That's great. So Kaz, you've been a maker way before Raspberry Pi, yeah?
Oh God, yeah. I've been a maker since, I don't know, since old school maker fair in the UK back in the day in like 2009. Since before I met you two. So that's like a long time ago, isn't it now?
Yeah.
So that's like at least a decade.
What was the go-to hardware back then?
Arduino.
On
an Arduino, of course it was an Arduino. Everybody was using an Arduino back then. It was like the best thing, and everybody learned C, C+, and C# to be able to code the thing, and it was dead awkward.
It's so applicable though.
But yeah, it's still applicable, and actually I quite like some of the hardware. I actually think it's really useful. So to be honest, when I tend to have three scales when I teach kids. I'll start them on like a microbit at primary, and then I'll move them to like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, and then at the top I'll have them on a Raspberry Pi. So, there's a layer system going up, from, a straight board that holds nothing to a full-blown computer.
Yeah. That's cool. Now, I remember meeting you, Kaz, at which yard camp was it? It was in Liverpool, and we had like a little room set up for kids to hack stuff.
2012? 2012 might have been.
Could have been.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't
Same
know.
year we had the open hardware jam, I think.
Yeah.
That would have been 2013, I think.
Was it?
Yeah, I think
2013?
so. I think so.
When did I do the first open hardware jam? Must have been around then.
No, that was 2015, I think. wasn't it?
I don't know. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I think so.
It was one of them, but I did the open hardware jams after that, didn't I?
Yeah.
So then we always had like hardware for kids and hardware you could meddle with and things you could have. I know that like MakeFest started in 2014.
15.
Yeah.
15.
Sorry, I'm being pedantic now.
I know.
Yeah,
15.
2015.
I start organising it in 14. We run our first in
all right,
15.
yeah, fair enough.
So it'll be sometime before then because I knew everybody way before then happened. But yeah, yes, it feels a long time ago. I feel really old these days, like an old maker.
What are
I
some
think
of
we
the
all are.
coolest
Given the
projects?
last 2
that-
years, I think we all are.
Oh
Really.
yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, I just do. I think the last 2 years have took it out of everybody. But yeah, I feel like a really these days, like when I'm looking at kit, when I'm running stuff. So like I've just done a whole bunch of workshops for Create Education with British Aerospace, running 3D printing sessions, and like I was trying to explain like this lovely, beautiful Ultimaker to kids, and then I was literally like, back in the day, you used to have to laser cut your 3D printing parts out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like so old. I was like,
At
sat
least you're
there
not saying
thinking
you
of
built
when-
your own chips out of sand.
No, but I felt
Yeah.
like I might as well have been because what they were looking at was so far removed from what I remember us using so long
Yeah.
ago to make anything that it was like, wow, this is incredible. You know what I mean? But it just has progressed so much over that time.
Well, yeah. Well, it leads on nicely. But talking to Dan a second about OddCamp when we had the open hardware jam and Pete Lomas turned up with Raspberry Pis. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah, that was 2012. That was when the Pi first came out. The first Pi, the original one. We had an event in Liverpool. Obviously, we were running OddCamp at Liverpool John Moores University. We were always great and supportive, so I'd like to mention them. They helped us out, and we had Pete came along, and I didn't know. I don't know if you knew, but I didn't know he was bringing. Was it 300 Raspberry Pis he brought with him? And this was at a time when you couldn't buy them anywhere. They hadn't even come out yet. So I don't know how he made it through the car park and stuff without getting accosted, but he did. Maybe people didn't know what he had with him, but he sold all of them, didn't he? I think he sold every single one that weekend. And it was it was the launch of the Pi, really. So I like to. It's probably not true, but I like to think we had some role in launching the Pi in the UK.
I think a lot of the makers started to use it really early on, didn't we? Because it was
Well,
really
everybody,
amazing.
you couldn't get one for love nor money at the time, and I didn't even get one myself. So, and I was running the event, so I didn't even get one. So, because I didn't know it was on, I didn't know Pete was selling them at the time. I think I was running around doing something else. And
it was such a great event, though. That it just had that sense of community really early on, didn't it? It was just like all the early people were at Orc. Like, just people you just wouldn't expect, but yeah.
I think it's because there's a big crossover between, because the Raspberry Pi is open source, it runs Linux, it can run other things, but it runs Linux, and Python's a big thing for coding, all that kind of stuff. It kind of fit into the open source world really well, I think. It hit all the kind of interest points of a lot of people who me and Les were already kind of hanging around with at the time. All the usual reprobates that were hanging
the
around.
usual ones,
the usual suspects, as we call them. Yeah, so that fit in. So the whole Linux user group community, I think, jumped straight onto the Pi thing and got really into it. As soon as we found out we could run like Debian on it and stuff, we were ridiculously excited, and there was a few things. So we were very lucky that I'm going to mention them because I think we should. In Liverpool, we have quite a nice maker community, and we had Maker Night and Maker Day, which like Adrian McEwen and people like that were running through Does Liverpool, which is a local hack space or makerspace. And co-working space that you can find if you're interested. If you're looking if you end up in Liverpool one day, someone did this to me the other day. It was like, I'm in Liverpool and I need somewhere to work for the day. So I sent them to Does and they were like, I can hot desk in there. And I can,
it's amazing.
They've got like 3D printers and laser cutters and all kinds of cool stuff in there. But because we were kind of lucky to be there, we were already doing loads of stuff with Arduinos. I wasn't particularly, but Adrian was. And other people were doing stuff with Arduinos. And then suddenly there was this whole... Because I love the Arduino, but the Pi is a bit of a level above for me.
It's a level above, I think.
It's more of a full
computer.
Isn't it? I was going to say it's a full computer rather than a little board.
So I agree. You had that community that was there kind of at the time that just sort of fell together. And because we were all the right people at the right spot, org had kind of come from the open source, and I was the maker who was interested in educating.
Yeah.
That was all I was. I was just the educator maker. Everybody else had kind of their own interest. I had an interest in kids, so that's how I ended up in teaching, because I thought I want all of this for kids, but I knew full well that you couldn't just be like, oh, teachers, you can learn all of this, it'll be fine, and or you could just develop it and or go and try and train teachers in it. It was too vast, really. So at that point it was like, right, I'll go and do it. I'll go and do the job. I'll go and learn how to do the job, and then I'll go and learn all of the constraints of doing that, and then I'll set up a makerspace. So now I'm kind of a foot in teaching and back in tech again. So it's but today we have maybe 50 odd makerspaces in education in the UK. So in the 5 years we've ended up with about 50.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to touch again on, you were talking about educating and kids. I want to know, out of all your experience, what are some of the cool projects that you've seen kids put together? Because sometimes it doesn't take a lot of experience. It just takes an insane amount of imagination.
Oh, I've got some awesome projects I've seen put together. And in fact, there's probably one that me and Les can talk about. But I've seen some great ones where I've seen kids do virtual reality kind of programs with 3D printed artifacts from museums to loads of hardware devices. The favorites are things like, the problem is that kids often have higher expectations than they can originally succeed. So inevitably you go, what do you want to build? And they go, I want to build like an iPhone. A spaceship.
An iPhone. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's going to probably take some time. So inevitably you end up building a lot less intense projects at secondary and primary level than you actually think. So you get a cool project, but it's never like massively huge. Yeah. They have big aspirations, but they don't have the skills yet to pull them out.
But that pushes them to learn, doesn't it?
Yeah, it pushes them. So what you do is you start with like, oh, you want to build that iPhone? Well, let's start with app development, and we'll start building apps for you. And, I've seen apps that are, I want to make sure that I can, match and orientate my makeup to, I want to make sure that I can remember an umbrella every time I get to school. I've seen Twitter kind of bots that run on Raspberry Pis that are weather stations that text the school kids whether they need their umbrellas. And I've
Nice.
seen, I've seen all kinds.
That's
so
very cool.
To be honest, I tend not to like Pacific projects, but there's two Pacific projects that I'm always a bit like, that's an incredible example of maker in young people. And one of them's is Edgeblocks by Josh. And I'm sure Les at some point will be able to tell you more about that, of him turning up at MakeFest when he was so young and just building a few things. And then next thing you knew, he had, the entire Edgeblocks platform. He's an amazing maker. And the other one's Avi, who's down in London, and she's currently Girls Who Code, and she's a very young maker who's been doing maybe a few years now. And she's doing projects to encourage young people to be in making. And she's probably about 14 years, and she's just, I think, won one of the big national awards for making. So she's an incredible maker.
Oh, well.
She's almost as old as the pie.
Yeah,
Pretty
much. Oh my God, is the pie that old? Oh my!
It turned 10 this year.
Yeah, it's 10, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's some examples of great young makers, and you can see them quite often at Coolest Projects every year. So if you do Coolest Projects nationally, if you can, it's worldwide, go look at it. The Coolest Projects is the best place to go showcase projects by kids.
Sounds cool.
Definitely.
So I think you see a lot of them, but it's really always hard to pick which one.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely. So leading us on nicely now to, Liverpool MakeFest, an event. So was it July 2nd? So Saturday, July 2nd?
Yeah, it's Saturday, July the 2nd in Liverpool. It's in the city centre. It's in the big, beautiful flagship national Liverpool Library. It's the Central Library. So we've got this huge, big building. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's got that beautiful oak Hornby room. Just the most incredible room to go into. And we fill it with makers for the day and bring all the projects. So, because it's the first one, lots of other MakeFests happen across the country. So we have things like MakeFest Holton's been on, Stoke's been on, Preston's been on.
We had a Preston one we went to.
Yeah, we've been loads. But MakeFest Liverpool was the first. So
Yeah.
it tends to get a lot of people, and a lot of people turn up. Loads of people are coming. So we got some cool stuff on the radar. We've got
Yep.
recycling plastic projects. We've got clay
Yeah.
projects. We've got yarn bombing. We've got robotics. We've got pie. We've got coding platforms. We've got, I think we've got everything underneath the kitchen sink this year. And we normally spend a year planning it. But this year, because of COVID, we kind of restricted it a bit because we didn't know whether we'd run it, because we didn't run one last year due to the confinements of it.
Yeah.
And the year before we didn't. Instead, we asked everybody who was involved in making to instead build PPE. That was what we said. Go build PPE.
Yeah.
Go do that with one of the PPE groups in your local makerspace. Go do that. Help the NHS. But we were worrying about whether we should run one, weren't we?
But this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so we delayed on the usual years-long planning. So this one is running very much like the first one. So it'll be back to our old school roots, which is 6 weeks until you kind of get to run one, which was how the first one ran.
Yeah.
But this one was, we started running it in March. And I wondered how it would be, how the maker community had survived, whether we had makers out there, or whether makers had, done all right, or whether maker
Yeah, with the
businesses had gone
lockdown.
under with the lockdown. So we didn't know what our usual bunch of makers across the UK would look like. So we put it out and thought, we'll just see what happens. And they have come out in force. We are packed.
Awesome.
Absolutely packed.
Yeah,
So-
it's free. Sorry, I was just going to say it's completely free for people to attend. So if you're in the area, or you can get to Liverpool on the 2nd of July, provided you can find somewhere to park, you can definitely come and get the train. It's dead easy.
the
Lime
train.
Street Station's like over the road, near enough. Les can attest to that. He's been there a few times.
Okay.
And so it's really it's open to everyone. We just want to get people to come along and have fun, really.
Yeah, and it's really it's designed for the public to come and have a look at some of the projects that are going on across the country in making. So we've got everything from, for example, Bright Boxes there this year, doing things with girls, and we've also got things like, for example, Code Nations there doing coding workshops. We've got Dr. Footlongs there doing robotics. So there's loads of kind of projects that we do, or makers that are out there that come to showcase at MakeFest. It is for makers of all ages, every single age, little primary school kids up. I want lots of children. I'm always big on having kids there.
There's something for everyone.
Yeah, and I agree they have doubled down during MakeFest. So I was like, oh, how will it be? And then makers sent me projects and pitches, and I was like, oh, everybody's been really busy, haven't they? Like building huge projects.
Yeah.
So then I've had to find room in the big central library to fit everything in. So we're fighting with that, aren't we, Dan?
We are.
Yeah, fitting everything in may be a hard time, but it's free and it's there for the day. If you're a maker and you turn up, we also make a big point of this being a festival for makers. So there is an after party always at Liverpool does. That you can go to if you're a maker, turn up and you can mingle with all the makers.
That's true. It's a good way of meeting other makers.
Meeting other makers. So
Like
if
Les?
you want to turn up,
Like Les. Yeah.
I just make a mess.
If you go to the buffet, you can meet Les.
No,
Easy,
actually, if you go
easy.
to the pizza, you know what?
No, actually,
You
that
say
doesn't apply anymore.
You say that, but I wanted to bring this up.
Oh,
you say
no.
that, but actually, Blaise is mostly responsible for food when he has been at MakeFest organising. Because the first MakeFest, Les and Dan were responsible for feeding everybody.
We were.
And, oh my God, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
We'd ran it on a shoestring budget. We had no idea what we were doing. We put to ourselves, we'll put like maybe 2 or 3 stalls in a library, and then within 6 weeks we'd filled 5 floors of a library, and it's a huge library. The
It is
Liverpool
big, yeah.
one. It's massive.
It is
and
big.
I thought we'd have like 1 or 2 people, and next thing you knew, we had like 200, 300 makers. It was just ridiculous. And then I thought, okay, so maybe that's a bit more, but we'll have to do kind of sandwiches and lunches and things because they're going to be there all day and they're going to get hungry and stuff, and we didn't know what to do. So I tasked Dan and Les to sort out food.
Yeah.
I will let Dan pick up this tale.
Really? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So we were going to do toasties, but we decided the Breville was going to be too difficult. It'd take too long. So we ended up. I had a contact at an Italian. It makes it sound really shady, doesn't it? I had a contact at an Italian restaurant who made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I asked him to make. I think it was 300 pizzas. Maybe it wasn't 500 pizzas. It was something like 300 pizzas.
Yeah.
And which me and Les then set off in the van to go and fill the van with pizza, basically, which is what we did. And then we brought it back, didn't we? And
they brought it back, and then
we found out none of it had been sliced. So like we brought it back and then realised that they hadn't cut any of them, didn't we? So we had to try and find. Like we were like, has anybody got any knives? What are we going to do?
But nobody brings in a
I still think we should have used a laser cutter
to a library.
Yeah.
So I had to sit on the floor and figure out ways
we had to work
cut
out how
pizza.
to do it. Yeah.
It was crazy. But honest to God, it's probably one of my favourite memories, watching Dan and Les try and fight to get 300 pizzas out of a cut. It starts, MakeFest, if you're wondering, it starts at 9 o'clock on the dot on the 2nd of July and it runs till 5.
Yeah, but people come and go during the day.
People do come and go during the day.
So you don't have to be there at 9 specifically. Unfortunately, we do.
We do.
I do.
Well, we're there earlier.
Yeah.
But it starts if you look up the Liverpool Central Library, it's the usual library times. So it opens and we run it for the day and then we shut it down for the day. So anybody can turn up at any point. There's no need for a ticket. There's no need to book. There's no need to pay anything. No. You just turn up and come and have a look around.
That is the question I get more than anything else through Twitter, because I mostly look after our MakeFest Twitter account and other things, and people are constantly asking, where are the tickets, how do I buy them?
Well, I'm going to put up, I normally have
any.
There isn't any, but I do put up an Eventbrite just to reassure people so that they can, if they want, get a ticket, but nobody's going to check that ticket. But I do put it up there. It is a library. Anybody can walk in. So, there's a big...
I don't think we could make it a paid event even if we wanted to.
No, but that's one of the reasons why I set it up in a library. So you couldn't make it a paid event. Makers volunteer their time at MakeFest.
Yeah.
All the crew volunteer their time. Nobody gets paid for MakeFest at all. All of the kind of things we need for maker badges or T-shirts are done through library funding. Whenever we do library funding for it, we try and build into that funding part of it as funds for maker companies to thrive within the region. So we've funded companies like Mako, who do coding with drones for the first business startup. We funded people like Little Sandbox or now Steam Engineers, who do stuff with kids and workshops. So we've funded various maker businesses over the years through it, and it just gives them a leg up into the industry if they need support for maker activities across the Liverpool region or the Merseyside region.
Through the wonderfully named Make a Difference.
Yes.
Which I like. I still think that's an amazing
Make a Difference, it's called.
Make a Difference is the project.
Yeah.
That's a cracking name, that.
It is, isn't it? I didn't come up with it.
We didn't come up with that
I love
one.
that name.
Denise Jones, our key other founder and librarian genius,
yeah.
came up with that one. She's a wonderful librarian who is just the heart and soul of it. So she came up with the Make a Difference project, and she's going now. I think we're going to do another round of the Make a Difference project next year.
Yeah.
Is there any online coverage for people who can't make it? Because we have a lot of viewers like me who are.
Do you know
across
what?
the pond, so.
I don't know actually, because quite often we do this thing where we haven't organised it a lot to put online coverage, but actually we do Ignite.
Yeah.
And every year we do Ignite talks across the day.
I was going to say you should probably explain what. Do you want me to explain what
Yes,
Ignite
please.
talks are? Okay, so it's very simple. A lot of people watching will probably know. If you don't, then Ignite is like a global movement that was started by O'Reilly, the publishers, and basically the idea is that you have a series of 5-minute talks, and they're strictly limited to 5 minutes. They're all timed out. You get 20 slides, and you have, is that right, 15 seconds per slide? So yeah, 20 slides, 15 seconds. My maths is bad. 15 seconds per slide, and they auto advance. And when you get to the end of the slides, your talk is over. So you have to think of something that you can talk about in 5 minutes, that you can, relay whatever you're interested in. It can be a, project that you work on. It could be anything really. It doesn't matter. The key is that it's like, tell us something interesting, keep it short, I think is the kind of tagline for it. But we have an Ignite event as part of within Liverpool MakeFest, so people can. We'll probably have that on YouTube because we normally stream the talks.
Yeah. So we stream the talks from the
yeah.
event on the day. So all of MakeFest's Ignite talks will be streamed.
Yeah,
and
through
lots and lots and lots of through the Ignite channel.
Yeah, through Ignite Liverpool. So if you search for Ignite Liverpool, you'll find the website and actually the dates on there. And I think there may be some lists of speakers. I haven't really looked, but there may be some speakers listed on there already. The topic this time is future. Visions of the future, I think.
Yes, it is Visions of the Future.
The future of things like transport in Liverpool specifically. So things like, we've got people talking about electronic vehicles. We've got people talking about the future of public transport potentially, what that could end up looking like, and stuff like that. And that bit will be online, yeah.
But in all honesty, if you've got worldwide coverage, which I know you have, and you've got people who are interested in it, you know, one of the things I'd really encourage anybody to do, and I really do if you're a maker, if you're in a town or area and you're a maker and you don't have a community of makers or makers around you, or you don't know where they're going, then please set up your own MakeFest. We wrote, if you type in MakeFest, libraries, gov.co.uk, you can actually find our MakeFest advice, and you can go there and there's some good guidance for how to set up and build a community of makers to run a MakeFest, to then bring the community together to have an event. So really the reason I put it out there was so people could do their own, for their own city, their own village, for their own area. If they wanted to run one, they could. So anybody can run one. There's only one condition. It has to run in a library, a museum, or a public space.
Community space.
And it has to be free. So that's it. That's my
Sounds
only
open source.
conditions on it. Yep, completely.
Yeah.
So everybody has to be able to participate in it. And then all the makers who come, you know, they obviously can participate for free as well. All the organisers do. You just go to your library or your community space, you go with our guidance and you say to them, here you go, that's what they're doing here. You can go to our website, you can use any of our images, any of our media, any of our pictures to make your case, anything. Just set it up. And if you call it something, MakeFest. You know, that's always useful so we know where everybody is. So MakeFest Preston's MakeFest Preston, you know, Liverpool's Liverpool MakeFest. It's various other MakeFest Manchester's MakeFest Manchester. So, you know.
I think there's a pattern there.
Yes, there is a pattern there. So if you want to set one up, do it.
And if you want to know about, if you want to like see what happens at MakeFest, there are some videos already on YouTube and other places. There's one on our website, which thankfully is up on the screen here, liverpoolmakefest.org. On that front page, even there's a little YouTube video you can click on and get an idea of what goes on the day.
Cool. So before I wind this up, because we're a little over time, but don't worry about that. It's fine.
Are we chilling out and having just a nice chat? Because I feel I've not said anything in this moment. I feel like
when you're excited and you're doing something live, it's like the speed of light in your brain.
No, it is, and we're no rushed. So go on. What do you want to talk about, Les?
Well, I just wanted to basically, it's a warning, but also just a bit of advice. You know, will ABX Labs be there? The digital electronic sweetie
Yes,
shop?
they will.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
of course they will. Yes. So ABX
Brilliant.
Labs will be there, and Exhibits is there this year. So, you know, we're quite happy for anybody to come run or anybody to be at a MakeFest. It opens once a year. And when we open it, we announce it on Liverpool MakeFest Twitter and on our website. Anybody, anywhere can request a spot at MakeFest for anything. All we do is we assess as a community and a group of makers whether we think it's in the maker's ethos.
Yeah.
Now there's a whole chapter on MakeFest in the guidance on what's in the maker's ethos. If it's providing kit to makers, that's in the ethos. If it's providing a demonstration of something there, that's in the ethos. If it's providing a workshop for young people or people to use, that's in the ethos. What's not in the ethos is probably like, oh, I've got this, you know, huge non-maker firm that's going to sell me, you know, something really boring. That's not the ethos.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I want to see is maker companies, maker firms, maker individuals, makers get together. And everybody who's a maker will know exactly what I mean by that. So what I want to see is those. So there'll be kit there. There'll be kit for sale there. There'll be free workshops there. There'll be free demonstrations there. There's all kinds.
Awesome. So Kevin and Martin in the chat, you better save up your pennies because ABX Labs is going to take all your money.
Yeah, every time, you
Yeah.
know. So there's several of them in there, and we normally put them so they everybody ends up buying a whole bunch of kit when they're there. So you know,
It's kind of like
comes with
pick and mix
territory.
for
It is
geeks,
like
isn't
pick
it?
and
It's
mix
very
for
much like
geeks.
pick and mix. You should weigh them at the end. That's how they should do the pricing. I don't know. Maybe they're not into that idea, but you
I went
should
out
weigh
last
them at the
time
end.
with was it a 32 by 32 RGB LED matrix, 3 of them from AB Extras, because I thought might come in handy one day, and it did actually 2 years
Yeah.
later. But
I thought you were going to say I've never used them. I was convinced you were going to say I've never used them.
I've got a box full of sensors that I've not used yet. That's another story.
I've got.
Okay.
I like had to sort out because I'd moved into university research.
Oh, here we go. There you go.
Oh
Look.
my god, yeah.
Awesome.
Stuff
'Cause
that
it moved-
you don't know when you need it.
Because
Very
I'd
true.
moved office into my university and like set up, and the office is like the size of a shoebox. Like I've not got like this huge classroom now because I'm on the roam. So, and because I'm going into different schools to do it, I was like, oh, I'll have to bring a whole bunch of stuff back, you know, because it won't go in my university office, and I'll bring it back. Oh my god, like my house now. I should be ashamed. It's like a giant, huge, just giant electronic mess. It's just wall to wall of stuff.
If
So
you don't
I'm-
have totes of bits, are you even a maker?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. The problem is that you have loads of boxes with bits, don't you? And then you're like, oh, I was going to build that with that bit, and then I started it. And
You
one
try
of
to
the-
organize it.
yeah, and you try and organize it, and it becomes. I love those big racks for the, you know, with tiny little electronic component bits that you can label. Les will have one, no doubt, on his desk. I love them. They're great.
He's got 4.
Yeah, exactly. And they're wonderful to organise, and they just make everything a bit more easier for when you're building projects. But inevitably, like, there's always at least 3 projects on my desk that are halfway in completion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
And they're always halfway in completion because I'm doing something else. And yet the things that I desperately want to finish. And like, I'll do a little bit and then I'll stop. I'll do a little bit and then I'll stop. I'll do a little bit and then I'll stop. And I just keep them there in just like a pull-out box so I can just build things as I go. So at the moment, it's my 3D printed top. That's, box is a shame.
Box is
House fits
shame.
project. Do you know what? I used to tell kids when I teach them, and it's really good advice for makers actually, that if you don't hate your project halfway through, then you're not really making. You know, if you love your project the whole way through, there's something wrong. So, you know, halfway through a project, you hate what you're building. You just hate it, and you don't want to look at it. You don't like it, and you're like struggling to finish it if it's stretching and challenging you. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh my god, I am so proud of this. This is amazing, Joe. And then you're really pleased with it. But for the middle section, it's always the awkward bit. And I've got a 3D printed top that I'm wiring with light sensitive LEDs that change color. I've got a handbag project that's on the go. That's been on the go. Yeah, poor Jackie Pease from Does has been trying to get me to finish the handbag project for ages. And I've got a couple of kind of LED kind of wearable projects that I'm doing because I really love to do that bit. And I just don't get enough time to do it. So hopefully now I'm not quite as much in the classroom and a bit more in research. I might have a moment to do some more of them.
MakeFest would be a good excuse to finish those up.
Yeah, I know.
Should be.
I know, and it should be. And I actually think my 3D printed top is nearly done. So I think that is probably going to get worn. And actually, it's a lovely, 3 stages of making, totally. I love it, I hate it, I love it. It is. That's exactly it. And I think really you've got to kind of get used to that when it happens and expect it. Because then if you know it's coming, it's not as bad. But sometimes I think we punish ourselves because projects take so long. You know, like my project on my top's been going on for like, I don't know, 18 months now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's been
Bloody hell.
going on for ages.
Fair enough.
But I think that's okay, you know, because eventually it'll be done. I think sometimes we pressure ourselves to finish a project when actually maybe we should just take it easy and just really enjoy the process and not stress ourselves out about it. But makers are always dead eager, aren't they? They're always like, oh, I'm building this.
It's usually
I'm
because
gonna
you've
work
thought
on
of
it
something
all the
else by
time."
then, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to finish this to get onto that other cool thing I've just thought
I know, but the
Yeah.
problem is there's not a lot of makers do that. Les, do you do that? Do you like start a project and then finish it? Or are you like me where you start one, do a bit of it, then start something else, do a bit of that, and then start something else and do a bit of that?
Both. If it's professional projects, so you know there's money involved, the project gets finished. If it's personal
Exactly.
projects, well, they just go to the side of the desk and then slowly move further away from the desk.
Yeah, so I have the same. I have professional projects that I'm doing for like kids, or I'm doing product development, or I'm doing stuff with kids, or I'm doing projects to educate kids, or I'm writing stuff for kids. And I have all the technical bit of that. And then to the side, I have things that I really want to build that just keep lurking there. And whenever I get 10 minutes, I'm like, I'll build a little of this. I'll just add a little bit more. I'll just do a bit more wiring here. I'll just do a little bit of code there. And so it takes eternity for me to finish my actual ambitious projects for me. And because there's such a disparity between maker educator and maker, you know, what I want to build as a maker is so vastly different than what I have to build as an educator. So, you know, the scale's slightly different. I'm not going to turn up to kids and be like, oh, we're going to build an AI. You know, it's just not going to happen. You know, so what you need to do is just scale it. So certain projects I just can't, you can't do that. So I have to scale it down. So I always get dead frustrated, like, but I really want to do like this color changing handbag, and I've worked it out and everything, and I want to do it, right? And I really want to finish it. And it's not the kind of thing I can do with kids. And I just desperately want to do it. But then on the other hand, I'm like, but it's still spreading the maker ethos and being a maker and doing what's good for future makers. So kind of the balance, isn't it? You do loads of that though, Les, don't you? Loads and loads of charity work, and loads of working with kids, and loads of Raspberry Pis,
Raspberry Jam.
and loads of Raspberry Jams, and endless.
Raspberry Jam, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
You're getting interviewed now.
Who's interviewing who?
Yeah. We flipped the tables.
Do you want to know what happened? You invited a teacher on, and then you were like, oh, no, this will be fine. And then Caroline starts asking you questions. So come on, Les, tell me all about this.
Oh, Raspberry Jams. I've been doing them since I went to the first one in Preston in 2012, which was technically the first ever Raspberry Jam.
Wow.
So that was
that
Alan
was early in the
O'Donoghue.
day.
Yeah.
I met
Alan,
Alan O'Donoghue in the first stages of running Raspberry Pi, and it was down south somewhere. And I met Claire Garside, who's also a maker educator, brilliant maker educator, doing a PhD in that now. And I met her, and she was like, what's this making? And I was like, okay, let me introduce you to the maker community. She was like, oh my God. And now she's like, she's a brilliant, accomplished maker. But it was so early on. So it would have been around the same time, I suspect. So come on, tell me about what was your first Pi? One, right?
My first Pi was Raspberry Pi 1 256 meg model, so the original batch.
And what was your first Pi Jam like?
Pi Jam? What, the one I organised or the one I went to?
The one you organised. All three of us are organisers. What was the first one like to organise?
First one I organised, Blackpool Raspberry Jam, way back in, was it 2015, I think, something like that. Fantastic. We had a great time. We only had a small room and about 30 kids, which is, let's see, it's quite oppressive because you've got so many kids in a small space. There's only so much that ear defenders can protect against.
It's true.
And they were squealing with delight as they're hacking things together. So I just took a load of Poundland special toys, so dollar store toys, dumped it on the table, and let the kids just have at it with soldering irons and wire strippers and that sort of thing.
One of the
Let
first things I went to was Mitch Altman ran workshops in the early days when I first became a maker. And he came over to visit Liverpool and stayed with me and Aurora and stayed with us. And he turned up with Jimmy, I can never remember Jimmy's name, Mitch Altman and Jimmy Rogers.
Hendrix? No.
The original founders of San Francisco's.
Yeah,
the original founders of San Francisco's Hackspace,
the Make,
Noisebridge.
Noisebridge, yeah.
And they stayed with me, and we built, I think my daughter was maybe about 3, and she built a Noise Begone, and she built a tiny little game, and she still has it today, and she's about to turn 18 next year.
Scary.
And
now I
she
feel
remembers him visiting. Now you feel old, don't you? Yeah, she remembers him visiting and staying with us, and we had such a good time. And I remember him saying to us, "Oh, Kaz, that's, trying to do it in teaching. That's a push. That is, normally it's like he does workshops all over the world, and he was like, that's going to be quite intense because they're so conformed, and it's such a hard thing to do. And we still talk all the time now on email. He's absolutely lovely. He's such a talented maker." So I'm always pleased to see him and see him do stuff. So I'm always quite pleased I managed to get it into schools. But yeah, she was. That was like the first time I remember making anything. Do you remember making something? Like, what's the first thing you ever made?
You're putting me on the spot now. What was the first thing I made? God.
Because then we're going to ask Ash, and
Okay.
we're going to let Les round up.
Right, okay. To be honest, I mean, it was probably something with an Arduino, I would have thought, if we're talking about that kind of making.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to be when I was a kid, I was quite into Lego Technics, which was kind of like a forerunner of making, wasn't it, really? Because you had little motors and things.
And lots of clones based around it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was, I remember making a car, like a little race car with Lego Technics. That was quite good. As for Arduino stuff, probably would have been something like a soil moisture sensor or something.
Yeah.
Which
yeah. Everybody did the lights, didn't they?
Yeah, we did.
Everybody did traffic lights. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Traffic lights. Yeah.
Oh, traffic lights. Everybody made traffic lights.
We did a project for FACT in Liverpool, which is an interesting kind of multicultural space they have there. But anyway, we did a project for them where they had a garden up in like the 8th floor of the building or something. They had this little like outdoor balcony garden, and they wanted us to set up a way for the plants to tweet when they wanted water. So we put in, I say we, this is basically Adrian did all this. I didn't do it, but I did some of it. But he set up Arduinos, and we made little soil moisture sensors. And then when the moisture level got to a certain point where it was so low, we'd have it send a message to the people inside to go and put water on it.
See, that itself, right, is kind of similar to my actual own first project, which I was working in geotechnical engineering and wanted gas sensors and moisture sensors for groundwork, so I had to learn to build them because they were ridiculously expensive and nobody could do it. And I was like, you know what, I can build this. So initially I started it as really as an engineer to just build sensors, and then slowly but surely just found the community, and then was like, these are my people.
One of us.
These are my people. So, and then that was it then. So, you know, since then it's always been maker first, you know, so that's kind of how I was. Ash, what was your first project you ever built?
I've been thinking while you were talking. I want to talk about the first one that really got some attention, because I think the first one's kind of boring. It was just like a RetroPie setup. But I got featured in Raspberry Pi magazine, Magpie, for a clapper. If you guys remember, you know, clap on, clap off. Yeah. And I didn't write the code for it. I modified existing code that someone else made. And I wanted to bring that up because that's what the community is kind of like whenever you're making stuff. Somebody's already made it. You can modify it. And I had to adjust the threshold of how loud of a sound is it listening for? How much time is it waiting? Was that one clap? Was that two claps? And it made an LED turn on, made it turn off. So I thought that was like a fun way to take a fun spin on the flash and LED, like we were saying earlier.
Yeah. God, when we look back at our first projects, they all seem very, very straightforward now, don't they?
Yeah.
It's weird
as
now.
they should. It's how we learn, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's that simple.
I think that's one of the things you don't see very often, really, as makers, where you start off with like, because we only see these days, kind of, if you look at like Maker magazines sometimes, you're like, they feel quite advanced projects sometimes, but actually some of the projects that we all did were like really straightforward projects to learn. You start with something really simple.
And now it's gone to this. I've got an accelerometer.
Oh my God.
And whenever it rotates, it'll change this from purple to green.
Oh my God.
Kind of hard to tell. So that's like totally different, and it's like a whole different dynamic. You got a whole new board has been created since I first started blinking LEDs, and it's battery powered. Like you just keep adding on to ideas, and you keep adding boards, and you get better.
Very true.
So I'm afraid I'm gonna have to wrap it up now.
It's been a lovely hour.
It has.
It has been.
And officially, we're now the longest ever episode of the podcast.
And we got interviewed.
That's easy.
Yeah, and we got interviewed.
And you got interviewed.
Yeah, well, quite often you do these things, right? And then you never talk about some of the things that you're doing, which, you know what, actually, I think is quite interesting sometimes to do it. And keep in mind, you are talking to us too. And we know Les really well. So we're bound to ask some questions of you and cheerlead like makers should, you know, to see kind of what things you're into and like you have the opportunity to have a bit of chat about the things you've done.
Thank you very much. So Liverpool MakeFest is July the 2nd, 9 a.m. at the Liverpool Central Library opposite the train station.
Yep.
Look at that. Like I know where it is.
Yes, you do. If you get confused, go look at Liverpool MakeFest and just turn up. Anybody's welcome. It's free. Just roll up on the 2nd of July. You'll see us outside the library. There'll be a giant plastic recycling and...
There is going to be a
Hard
big
to
plastic
miss.
recycling.
Yeah, there's a giant plastic recycling project from one of our local school makerspaces at Neston. Shout out to them, and a huge plastic tactics project as well thing going on there. So it's all plastic recycling straight outside the building today.
Yeah, and thanks very much for having us on. It's been great.
No problem.
Thank
Thank
you
you
guys for
both for
coming.
being on tonight. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week at the same time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. British Summer Time. See you next week. Ta-da.